Well, it can be hard to have just one pet. You know, at our house we have 2 cats. We had a dog who we missed terribly. So I'm not making a major case for only keeping one pet in a home. But I have to tell you that be careful. It's easy to believe that our love will cure the societal ills of other species. Well, there's a lot that can go wrong. Instead, let's try to set them up for success.
Cindy says she can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. Carolyn, would you get us set back up on this? There you go. Thank you very much. And if anybody's here has had a dog who, triggers aggression with another household dog or menaces a household cat, please put the details in the comment line so that I can share some information and help you out with this thing, because other people will benefit as well. And by the way, please send me some hearts if you find this information helpful, and tell me you're here. And if I haven't already met you, tell me where you're from. And in case we haven't met, I'm veterinarian Dr. Jeff Nickel. This is Tony, one of our cats. Gaston is the other guy who tends to be a little bit camera shy. I hope Tony will stay with me for this thing because I think he's photogenic. And so I have a story I want to share with you. Thank you, Carolyn. There we go. And it's about these 2 dogs. Their little dog parents are Leslie and Eric. Have a look at these 2 here. The Cairn Terrier is the brown one. That one's name is Maggie, and the other one is Little Debbie. And if you look at the body signaling of these 2 dogs, you'll notice that Maggie, the Cairn Terrier, the brown one, is leaning towards Little Debbie and watching her pretty carefully. And Little Debbie, for her part, you notice how her weight is shifted back just a little bit, and her ears are retracted, and she's not looking directly at Maggie. The little fuzzy white Little Debbie is looking away just a little bit, but she is not going to take her eyes off Maggie. And the reason is that she's worried. Now, you certainly can talk about which dog is higher status, or dominant if you like, and I think that's true. But just because Maggie is the leader, the higher status dog, that does not make her a stable leader. And we had problems between these 2 dogs, and it does have a happy ending, but these things can be a big problem. In my many, many years in general practice, I did a great deal of emergency work, and stitching up wounds from dog fights between household dogs who knew each other. That was pretty sad. And people make mistakes because they hope that because they love both dogs and they've had dogs in their life that they're going to be able to get through this thing and it won't be a big problem. Well, often it is. So let me tell you this story for starters. And any questions, by all means, put them in there and I'll get to them. I may get to them at the end. But Cindy, thank you. I think you can hear me all right now. And good. And Carol is here too. Carola, pardon me. I probably called you Carol before. I didn't mean to, Carola. I like to use people's names properly. Yes, good. There's sound. Wonderful. So anyway, here's this story. Again, Eric and Leslie are the dog parents. These are their real names. They've given me permission to use the story of Maggie, the one who's acting like, fuzzy Little Debbie is maybe a lower life form. They do tend to behave that way sometimes. Well, there had been 5 fights when Leslie and Eric brought Maggie and Little Debbie to see me, and they all involved food. Now, aggression between family dogs isn't always that simple, but many people, they don't fully understand the importance of identifying what are the motivators, what are the causes of the problem. So, let me tell you the story. Little Debbie was a dog, the fuzzy white one, there she is, that these folks had had for a long time. And she was an older dog for 3 years. In fact, she'd been their only dog. Prior to that, they had another small dog who Little Debbie got along with very well. She and this other older dog who passed on were great friends. They played and all that stuff. So they said, look, Little Debbie's been an only dog for 3 years, and she had a history of doing well. And here comes Maggie, the Cairn Terrier, much younger, who needed a home. Now, they hadn't thought of bringing this into account, but when I really gathered a thorough history from them, it came to light that Maggie had a history in her previous home of fighting with the other dog over food. Even though little Debbie never had that problem, Maggie had a history. And these things tend to, how does it go, Carolyn? Wherever you go, there you are. That applies to dogs too. It's not just people, right? So anyway, they pointed out that little Debbie has been more alert and active since Maggie has been added to the household. Well, there has to be a reason for that. Well, they also pointed out, after I, just kind of coaxed information out of them that they didn't realize was important but turned out to be, that Maggie had not slept during the day in all the time that they'd had her since she'd been added to their home. She'd been watching little Debbie from across the room, And in fact, even on a leash walk, Maggie, the Cairn Terrier, spent a lot of her time watching little Debbie. And it's making little Debbie nervous. So you can tell these are two dogs. Neither one of them has the quality of life that they should. They're both nervous. One of them is kind of agitated and the other is afraid. We love our pets. There's no way that we want them to go through life feeling stressed and anxious and worried. Okay? So, they'd often found that little Debbie moving around the house, she would keep her eye out for Maggie. And when she saw her, she would give her a wide berth. She'd go through a different room to find a route to the water bowl or the dog door, whatever, come to one of her people. She would do what it took to avoid Maggie. She was afraid all the time. Now, little Debbie also had one other interesting behavior. You say, well, here she is. She's worried about Maggie. She has a history of having played well and enjoyed the other dog who these folks had had sometime previously. What a sweet dog, right? Well, here was the other thing in little Debbie's history. Again, they'd had her for quite a number of years, is that she was prone to sniff, they said, women's hands, visitors, and then bite. She'd never inflicted a wound, but she'd caused a painful bruise or two. What the heck was going on with that? And what did that have to do with this antipathy that she had for Maggie? Well, let's learn more about the story. These dogs, it turns out, between the two of them, they were competitors for a high-value resource. And it was really more about Maggie than it was about little Debbie, Maggie the Cairn Terrier, because she had felt that if I don't get all this food, I won't get any of it. And that's the way dogs are. They are programmed for the concept of scarcity. In the wild, where they have survived and even thrived in all manner of challenging and, dangerous circumstances around the globe for tens of thousands of years, they've made it. They've survived. And they are community creatures. They gather food resources together as a group. They guard them together in their group territory. But it is sort of every dog for him or herself, to the extent that scarcity is what can keep you alive. Because in a lean year, when there is not enough food, for example, somebody doesn't make it. And so if I'm going to be a survivor this year, they absolutely, a high status dog in fact, has a legitimate right to first and often only access to the high value resources like food. Well, never mind that, believe me, these folks made a decent income. They weren't going to run out of dog food. Come on back up here, Tony T. Attaboy. They weren't going to run out of dog food. And you can explain that all day long to your dogs, but that private human logic is lost on a different species. Our dogs and cats certainly communicate with us, but that doesn't mean that you can convince them of a human point of logic. So here we have, they try to feed these dogs together, and many times people, they're the hall monitor. They'll stand there and they'll watch, and now you stay there and you stay there, and by golly, we're going to teach these dogs to behave well together. I mean, our family sits down and eats together, right? Why shouldn't our dogs? I'll tell you why. Because they're a member of a different species, and some of the rules are very different. So these dogs had a habit of fighting over food. Well, Maggie had that history, and what the problem was with Maggie was that she would just go for blood if little Debbie was around when she had food, and often things resembling food, like rawhides, bones, things like that. As far as Maggie's concerned, that's food. Well, the problem began to generalize to other contexts. Contexts where the resource, the perceived high-value scarce resource, even though it wasn't really scarce, was not quite as high value as food, such as being near the leaders, Leslie and Eric. And so Maggie would sort of guard access to them too. She was the high status dog. And you think, wait a minute. For these people, like all of us really, there's limitless love for our pets. Affection, hey, we've got plenty to go around. Shouldn't our pets understand that? No, not these. And many others will be giving each other threatening body postures. We need to be watching for those things. We do not want these things to escalate and turn into a knockdown drag-out. The injuries can be severe. I can go into detail about some of the injuries that I was confronted with in emergency practice that were far beyond the lacerations. It's pretty horrifying. Even small dogs. It's possible for one family dog to actually kill another one. We don't even want those thoughts to begin germinating in our dogs' minds. So we're watching their body signaling. And here we have this situation with Maggie and little Debbie where Leslie and Eric had said, there are times when little Debbie takes a circuitous route around the house to avoid Maggie. Well, that means that Maggie is giving her threatening body signals when there's no food at all. The fights have occurred when food's been present, but Maggie was threatening little Debbie a lot of the time. So we need to get this problem under control because the aggression can get triggered by almost anything. So here's what we did. We said, number one, we're going to feed these dogs never when they're together. If they are in the same room or even could get to the same room, there will never be food of any kind. Human food. We're not going to have Leslie and Eric sit down to dinner or lunch together if these dogs are together. When they have food, when the dogs have food, when there's rawhides, chew toys, greenies, anything like this, those dogs need to be completely separated. Only one can be with them and the other one needs to be on the other side of a closed door. And when they're fed, we use a structure. We say, all right, there are going to be 2 feeding times per day for these dogs. And in the morning, we're going to keep those food bowls stacked and out of sight. I have known dogs who have associated aggression with an empty, perfectly clean food bowl on the floor. So we keep 2 food bowls for these 2 dogs, and we keep them stacked in a cabinet with the door closed so that little Debbie and Maggie, they'll never see those bowls when they're together. So Leslie and Eric say, okay, it's feeding time. All right? So they have a designated feeding room for Maggie. That's where she eats. Put her in there, close the door. Little Debbie, a different room, close the door. Not on either side of a closed door because they can hear each other eating and that animosity can build. This can be a very serious problem. So the dogs were already separated and in there just, tapping their little fingers hoping that they're going to get food at some point. So then their folks take the food bowls out of the cabinet, measure the food. Sometimes if you get, particularly with an older dog who might develop, for example, a kidney or a heart problem, other things too, necessitate a special prescription food. You measure their own food into their own bowls. You're in complete control of who's getting what, all right? And you go to the first feeding room, doesn't matter which one, open the door, push that dog's food bowl in, close the door. Then you go to the other dog's feeding room, open the door, push her food bowl in, close the door. Then you give everybody plenty of time to eat and, 10 minutes, whatever. And then you say, okay, we're probably done eating. Go to the first dog's feeding room, open the door, pull the food bowl out, and close the door. That dog's still in there. Go to the other dog's room, open the door, pull the food bowl out, close the door. She's still in there too. Now we have our food bowls. We clean them, stack them up, put them in the cabinet, close the door, and then Maggie and little Debbie are allowed back together after there is no food at all. And this just becomes part of the daily routine. People say, hey, this is a hassle. I don't want this. Well, you absolutely do not gamble with this. I can tell you that not only are these methods based on research, and in this case pretty straightforward observational research of free-living dogs and how they behave and what the genetic model that's programmed into the canine brain. Never mind that they're a domestic pet in a perfectly excellent home that has no end of a steady stream of high-quality dog food for everybody. Forget that. They are domestic pets. They live with us. They belong in our homes. But right below the surface, they're dogs, and they are programmed to function in the wild. Martha's here too. Wonderful. I'm glad you're here. Thank you. So that's what we instituted, and I made it very clear that they were to never break these rules. Okay, and we also wanted to diffuse the hostility that Maggie had toward little Debbie in other contexts. Okay, so we made sure that they had these rules. Now, there were still the possibility things could go wrong, and I said, number one, if these dogs start to mix it up, I mean, everybody immediately wants to protect their dogs from injury, and they want to reach in there and grab them and separate them, right? Well, if a dog is really agitated, highly aggressive, and they can ramp up really fast, and something obstructs that dog's access to the target of his hostility, like a human body part, like a foot or a hand, the same thing can occur to that part of the human anatomy as would happen to a broom handle if you use that. They are obstructed, they're prevented from reaching that target, the other dog, either one of these dogs, and they will immediately redirect and bite seriously whatever that thing was, including your hand. And you think, well, I'll just grab little Debbie because she's not the aggressor. Oh no, that defensive aggression, that self-preservation that a frightened dog like little Debbie will have if Maggie goes after her, she can inflict just as severe a wound as the higher status dog. So you have no business reaching into a dog fight, ever. So what I told them I wanted them to do was to leave a 6-foot or longer leash attached to the collar of each dog at all times while they were indoors. And in case something started to go sideways, first step, always the same, completely ignore. And if you've been to a few of these little meetings of mine, you know that any response from the leader is regarded by the dog as a validation of its behavior and its emotional state of the moment. So if you want a behavior, respond to it. And if you don't want it, like aggression between your dogs, you completely withhold interaction. You don't say anything to anybody. You don't yell, reprimand, squirt with water, any of that stuff. You simply grab the drag lines. These are the leashes on their collars that they drag around the house. And you grab that drag line and you create distance. Go to another room, close the door, banish that dog to time out. So that what you don't have is you have derailed the problem. You have, as early as possible. What you don't do is say, well, gee, it looks like we've got a little snarky body language going here. Are we going to have a problem? No, you don't do that. You know, we tend to think of time out with our children, and oh, that's a punishment. And we don't want to punish these dogs unless we're sure that there were nefarious thoughts in their minds. Don't take that path. High-ranking dogs in a free-living canine social group will inflict what's called negative punishment, which is taking something away. It's something that's done very strong. In other words, we completely ignore, and we do it immediately following the undesirable behavior. And the undesirable behavior is not a knockdown drag-out. The undesirable behavior is beginning to get agitated. And in fact, if 99 times out of 100 you grab a drag line and go to timeout, and only once out of 100 times you really needed to, I say, good for you. You didn't miss that one time. Because dogs, subordinates, again, in a free-living social group, you know, they get shunned or banished sometimes for no apparent reason. Leader goes, I'm powerful, right? And the subordinates go, you powerful. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's so easy to anthropomorphize, to put human emotions on members of a different species. Thank you for those hearts. I hope this is helpful. It's perfectly good to love our cats and dogs as though they were little people in furry suits. And they touch us in that part of our heart, don't they? And that's healthy for us, and it's healthy for them. And the touching and the snuggling. Tony T is sitting down here. Honey, you can jump back up on my lap if you want. She says, no, I'm just sitting on the portal right now. I might come back later. I'm a cat. Well, it's a good thing to have that level of commitment and devotion. And we get that back from our pets. But absolutely, happy Thursday, Doctor. Thank you very much for that. Sid, great to see you here. That level of emotion, it's what it's all about as far as we're concerned in our family. But we have to remember that part of our empathy for our pets is allowing them to be different. Allow them to be members of a different species and to see things very differently than we would or than our children would. So we don't sit at the dinner table and say, now, you keep your hands to yourself and you mind your own business and teach life lessons while they're eating. We did that with our kids. Not with dogs like Maggie and little Debbie. We've got a blood feud going here. We don't trifle with that stuff. Avoidance is really important because every time these two dogs have ramped up their aggression, in the case of Maggie, the brown Cairn Terrier, it's absolute hostility. I'll kill you if you go near any of this food because I have to have it all. Or little Debbie, who's scared to death and might have to fight back. We're not messing around with that at all because every time they have ramped up, and they've ramped up far more times than their people have been aware, every time they've replayed these circuits in the brain, the synapses have gotten stronger. We now have modern brain imaging methods like fMRIs and PET scans, and we can measure the width of the neural circuits. We can see that there are more excitatory and inhibitory neural inputs that strengthen and speed and fine-tune the response because it's been practiced many thousands of times. That's how professional athletes at the Olympics become top of the game. Yeah, they've got talent, they've had great coaching, but they've also practiced these things thousands and thousands of times. Well, Maggie and little Debbie have practiced the ramp up in their reactive aggression many times. It absolutely has to be, you have to put the kibosh on that. But there's no way of doing that with a reprimand or squirting with a spray bottle or any other kind of punishment. That only intensifies their feelings of agitation in each other's presence. No, we derail this stuff when we put the kibosh on it, and ultimately we allow those neural circuits to weaken from disuse. We avoid this altogether. So we grab those drag lines and we separate these two dogs at the first hint that there even might be a problem. And we don't apologize for it. Step one, always the same, ignore. Step two, grab the drag line, go to timeout. Okay? Now, little Debbie, you know, that little soft touch there, that little fuzzy dog who's afraid of the other one, what was she doing being aggressive towards Leslie and Eric's female friends who would come and visit? These nice people would approach that little fuzzy dog and reach down to pet her because she was so darn sweet. And she had a tail wag, and she certainly looked like she was ready for an interaction. So why not walk up and pet her? And then she'd try to bite, or in fact did bite. What the heck was going on there? Well, that's called conflict-related aggression. And the conflict is not a conflict between, in this case, little Debbie and those visitors. It were conflicting emotional states in little Debbie's brain. Yeah, on one hand, she was a sweet and friendly dog, legitimately. And at the same time, if somebody got a little too close, somebody far bigger than she was, leaning over and approaching and reaching for her, triggered her fear. And this little dog is prone to fear. If you look at those retracted ears, that leaning away, that half look away that she has there with that other dog, she is a dog who is prone to fear. And so somebody approaches, she would like to interact, and then just as soon as they get another centimeter closer, fear ramps up and she panics and becomes defensive and tries to bite. And in fact did bite. Now, if you say she's a little dog, how much damage could she do? Oh, they can do a lot of damage. And this dog pulled her punches. Yes, she did bite people, and she caused painful bruises, but she never caused a penetrating wound. Doesn't mean she never will, but she held back on really inflicting injury because that was never her intent. Her intent was, oh my God, I'm scared to death, get away from me. And just a split second, literally, before that was, I'd like to interact with you. So what do we do in these situations? Well, again, we never punish, we never reprimand, because that would only cause this dog to feel worse. This is a fear-related behavior. Why punish fear? That doesn't make it better. Okay? So instead, I told Eric and Leslie, if you have friends who really want to interact with her, the first thing they need to do is get small. Squat down on the floor so they're not so big and towering. And number one, they should never approach this dog. In fact, nobody other than Eric and Leslie, and in some cases dogs are so frightened, even their people who they love and trust, should never approach, reach for, lean over, or stare at some of these pets because it triggers their fear. But instead, what these folks can do is squat down a good distance from little Debbie, turn their side, because dogs who meet each other, dog parks, in the wild, they turn their side. It means, I come in peace. I mean no harm. So they turn their side, and they don't look directly eyeball to eyeball. They look off to the side so that you can still see little Debbie, but she doesn't perceive a threat. Okay? You think, I mean this dog no harm. I love dogs. Yeah, that's important, for sure. Lost on little Debbie. She's a dog, and she may be misinterpreting the body signals of these visitors, but it's her reality. So let's be empathic. Let's walk a mile in little Debbie's moccasins here and say, all right, what's she feeling? You look at the body signaling. Look at her history. Nobody should approach this dog. Nobody should lean over or reach for her. They squat, turn their side, don't look directly at her. Thank you for that little smiley face. I'm glad this is helpful. And lure her. Now, if you're going to use food as a lure, completely legitimate, but Maggie, where should she be? Completely out of sight and not capable of coming into the scene behind a closed door. So these friends squat, don't look directly at her, turn their side, offer a little food. Little Debbie comes and says, I like you, and you have not scared me. And what we don't have then is a conflict. Yes, she likes people on one hand and wants to engage, and that business of fear, not there, because people have not triggered the fear. And of course, who's in charge of these interactions? Leslie and Eric, the pet parents. Their job is to set everybody up for success. So has anybody here had a pet like that? Tell me about it. Let me see if we have any here. Let's see. Oh, Kathy Miner Peterson. Thank you for watching. I'm glad you're here too. So, and Stacy, wonderful. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. So, here are some of the things you can do. You know, we're trying to teach little Debbie and Maggie to get along well. And we have their drag lines so that we can immediately ignore and then grab a drag line and create distance and put one in timeout. Those are pretty handy. But what if you're still a little worried? You can use a basket muzzle on one or both. This one right here is called a Baskerville muzzle. This is by far and away the best brand that we can use. They are lightweight, they're completely strong, and it's a firm rubber, but you know, it's flexible. And it has these nicely rounded edges. These not only come in different sizes, but in different head shapes. So for dogs with a long muzzle, like a collie or a whippet, or a much shorter faced dog, like a bulldog, they make muzzles that'll fit those. And if you look carefully, you notice that right down here, there's a little place where you can put a treat. So dogs can learn to wear these, and you may have heard me say this before, you never put a muzzle on a dog, ever. The dog chooses to put her face in it. And I say her because these two dogs are females, which interestingly, statistically, female dogs are far more likely to fight in a home than males and females. And much more likely than two males, although those things happen. It's far more likely with two females. So, for example, if I had a female dog and I wanted to add another dog, I'd probably reduce the risk by choosing a male. That's just me. Because I like to have the odds in my favor. So you put a little piece of food here like this, and you teach the dog to put his face in the basket muzzle, and very gradually they go, gee, every time I go near this thing, I get an immediate reinforcer. The immediacy is kind of important. And then you can teach the dog to wear this. Anybody ever tried one of these? If you've had experience with these, let me know. Or if you've had these problems and tried some solutions and nothing worked, let me know about that too. So, avoid reprimands. But you can use these things for safety. But you don't use these things as some kind of a crutch. In other words, you don't have your dogs wearing basket muzzles and then say, oh my goodness, they fought, but we don't worry about that stuff because they won't hurt each other anyway, right? Well, we do worry about that, and I'll tell you why. Is because there isn't anything about this preventative, this injury preventative, that gets in the way of the ramp up in those intense emotions of aggression and fear. We don't want those anymore. Remember what we said. We want to abandon those circuits in the brain so they can weaken from disuse. So we are doing our very best to avoid or derail early any ramp-ups in these unhealthy emotions. So if you use a basket muzzle, you're doing it so that just as an added safety. That's the reason. And the same thing with the drag lines. You're having your dogs drag these leashes around so that, just in case, you can grab the leash. Of course, ignore first. Always ignore to avoid inadvertently validating an unhealthy behavior. And then take that leash as though there's no one on the other end and put it in timeout. Okay? So we can avoid these problems altogether. No punishment. Did I mention that? No, but okay, let's see. Who else is here? Yeah, there's some. Okay, let's see. Who else is here? Who has a question? Well, I've got all these great visitors. Nobody had a question. I'm perfectly fine with that. Here, Tony, come back up here because I want people to see you. You're a very handsome fellow. So, if people have questions, I don't care what it is, if it's pet related. You can ask me things that aren't pet related, but those are only opinions. I don't have any research that I subscribe to that supports other things. Maybe climate change, maybe coronavirus. I read research on that stuff. But pet behavior, physical issues with pets, because I have many years of experience. Even though I'm a specialist now, I limit my practice to behavior disorders. If you have issues with ears, skin, stomach, intestines, joints, bones, eyes, if I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer. So you're welcome to send me those questions on Facebook if you like. And I just want to remind everybody to take the time to build a foundation of trust and choice and freedom for your pets before asking them to do things differently for you. Because our dogs and cats, just like people, here's something they share with us, can become obstinate if their leader only wants their needs met. But it's never too late. They will always allow us to teach them, to show them that we're not going to intimidate them, that they can trust us. They're the most forgiving creatures I've ever met. So don't worry about your mistakes. Just start over. Your pets will love you for that. Well, I hope you find this information useful. You're welcome to share this with any of your pet-loving friends. And you or anybody you want can subscribe to my website, drjeffnicol.com, drjeffnicol.com. And when you do, I'll send you, at no charge, my at-home pet first aid and CPR guide, which is worth printing out and keeping handy. And you can sign up on my website. Just go to the bottom of the homepage. You can put your email address in. And every Tuesday morning in your email box, you'll get this stuff. So thank you again for sharing a little bit of your time with me. I love doing these things because pets are mighty important to me, and obviously they are to you too. So thank you for those hearts to let me know that I've done something helpful. So thank you. I'll see you next Thursday. And by the way, next Wednesday, I'll be doing a Zoom group conference limited to 4 pet parents. And it's going to be on how to choose a trainer. And we're going to talk about that in next week's Facebook Live too. So thank you again. Have a great weekend. And everybody, please stay safe.